In a world where success is often measured by wealth and titles, some wounds remain untouched by power. This is the story of Clara Anderson, a brilliant CEO whose empire could not bring back her husband or heal the silence of her daughter Emma. For 3 long years, the little girl hadn't spoken a single word, her voice buried beneath grief. Clara tried everything: doctors, therapists, endless programs, yet nothing worked. Then, one ordinary afternoon at a city playground, their lives crossed paths with Ethan Miller, a humble single dad whose greatest wealth was the love he carried for his little girl, Lily. What happened next was not just a child's first words. It was the beginning of healing, hope, and the miracle of family. The late afternoon sun stretched across the city park, staining the playground in shades of amber and gold. Leaves drifted lazily to the ground, caught in the cool breath of autumn. Ethan Miller adjusted the strap of a battered guitar case slung across his shoulder and guided his 6-year-old daughter Lily toward the swings. He had promised her this outing after a long week at the garage, his hands still sore from turning wrenches. To anyone passing by, he looked like an ordinary single dad in worn jeans and a faded jacket. But behind his steady smile lay years of sacrifice. Once, long ago, Ethan had dreamed of stages and music. That dream had ended the day his wife walked out, leaving him with a crying 2-year-old and nothing but a guitar and a toolbox to survive. Since then, he had learned to transform emptiness into small wonders for Lily. Toy cars crafted from old bolts, bedtime lullabies played on rusted strings, harmonica tunes that made her laugh when she was too tired to smile. She was his purpose, his anchor, and every choice he made was for her. At the same moment, another pair entered the park, though their presence drew far more attention. Clara Anderson stepped out of a sleek car, her posture sharp, her tailored coat falling perfectly into place. She was 35, CEO of Anderson Tech, a woman who moved through boardrooms like a storm no one dared defy. Yet today, power meant nothing. Her eyes followed her 7-year-old daughter, Emma, as the little girl clutched a worn stuffed rabbit to her chest. Emma had not spoken since the night her father died in a car accident 3 years ago. She had seen too much, felt too deeply, and retreated into silence. Clara had tried everything: specialists, therapy, expensive programs, but nothing broke through. Now, at the insistence of yet another doctor, she brought Emma to the playground, hoping children's laughter might succeed where medicine had failed. Clara guided her daughter to a swing, but Emma sat motionless, dragging her shoes in the dirt, refusing to join the others. Clara's chest tightened with familiar frustration and grief. Lily, full of boundless energy, spotted Emma almost immediately. She abandoned her own swing and trotted over, pigtails bouncing. "Hi, I'm Lily," she chirped, holding up a tiny plastic pony with a chipped ear. "Want to play?" Emma froze, staring at the toy, then lowered her gaze, hugging the rabbit tighter. Clara shifted on the bench, ready to intervene, but Ethan had seen this before. He crouched beside Lily, tying her shoelace, speaking gently enough that Emma could hear. "That pony's pretty special, huh? I think your bunny might like a friend." His tone was calm, unassuming, not demanding. He knew the signs: the distant eyes, the closed-off body language. It was the same look Lily had worn the night her mother left, a look Ethan never forgot. Clara glanced at him, taking in his roughened hands, his simple jacket. This was not a man of polished edges or practiced charm, and yet something in his presence seemed steady. Before she could dwell, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small harmonica, the metal dull with age. "You know," he said softly, "this thing's been with me a long time. It doesn't sound perfect, but sometimes the broken notes are the best ones." Without fanfare, he lifted it to his lips and played a playful tune. Light and silly, almost like a child's song. Lily giggled, clapping her hands. A boy nearby stopped to listen, smiling. And then Clara's breath caught. Emma was looking at Ethan, wide-eyed, her lips parting as though the sound had cracked something open inside her. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, in the smallest voice, barely more than a whisper, Emma breathed, "Play again." The world seemed to still. Clara shot to her feet, her heart thundering. Her daughter's voice, after 3 years of silence, had broken through, not for her, not for doctors, but for this stranger with a harmonica. Ethan blinked, surprised but calm, and played again, the melody brighter this time. Lily joined in, humming off-key. Emma's fingers relaxed on the rabbit. She leaned forward, whispering once more, this time clearer. Again. Tears blurred Clara's vision. She had begged God, paid experts, sacrificed everything, and here, on a bench in an ordinary park, her daughter had spoken to a single dad with oil-stained hands. Gratitude warred with envy, awe with disbelief. Who was this man, and why could he reach her child when she could not? Clara's world, so carefully controlled, had cracked open, and in that fracture, she sensed the beginning of something she did not yet understand. The cafe across from the park smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, its cozy warmth a contrast to the chill outside. Clara sat at a corner table with Emma pressed close to her side, the stuffed rabbit perched loyally on the chair. Across from them sat Ethan and Lily, the harmonica resting near his rough hands as if it were just another tool from his garage. For Clara, the moment felt surreal. Just an hour ago, her daughter had spoken for the first time in years, and the sound of her voice still echoed in Clara's mind. Yet the miracle hadn't come from years of therapy or the latest medical breakthroughs. It had come from a stranger with kind eyes and grease under his nails. She tried to steady her voice. "You don't understand. Emma hasn't said a word since her father's accident, not one. And today—" She trailed off, unable to finish. Ethan leaned back, his tone calm but steady. "Sometimes silence isn't emptiness. It's just waiting for someone patient enough to listen differently." There was no pride in his words, no sense of victory, only quiet truth. Clara, who was used to people boasting about accomplishments, felt both disarmed and strangely moved. Lily, oblivious to the adult tension, slid a napkin across the table. "Look, Mom. Emma drew a bunny for me." On the napkin, a small sketch of 2 rabbits sat side by side. Emma glanced up shyly, her cheeks faintly pink, and for a fleeting second, Clara saw the little girl she had almost forgotten, the child who once laughed freely. Her throat tightened, but she forced a smile, unwilling to scare the fragile moment away. "It's lovely, darling," she whispered, brushing Emma's hair back gently. Clara turned back to Ethan. "And you? You make it sound so simple. But what do you know about this?" Her tone came out sharper than she intended. Ethan's expression didn't falter. "I know what it's like to watch your child hurt and not have the answers," he said softly. "When Lily's mom left, she barely spoke for months. I couldn't afford doctors or specialists, so I just sat with her. Played songs, waited. Little by little, she found her way back. Kids, they don't always need fixing. Sometimes they just need someone to remind them they're not broken." Clara was silent, struck by the way he framed it. She had spent years treating Emma's silence as a problem, a flaw to correct, pouring money into endless programs. It had never occurred to her that maybe Emma wasn't broken at all. The thought unsettled her, because it carried something she hadn't dared to feel in years' hope. Their conversation slipped into fragments of personal history. Clara admitted in a low voice, "I buried myself in work after the accident." It was easier than sitting in the silence with her. Easier to be the CEO than the mother who couldn't help her child. The admission cost her, but saying it aloud felt like peeling away armor she had worn too long. Ethan nodded, not in judgment, but in understanding. "We all cope how we can," he said. "For me, it was fixing things. Cars, bikes, even old radios. Anything to keep from thinking about the emptiness in the house after she left." While their parents spoke, the girls discovered a small play area with crayons and paper. Lily tugged Emma over, and Clara stiffened instinctively, ready to stop her, but Ethan gently placed a hand on the table. "Let's just watch," he murmured. Together they observed as Lily drew castles and dragons, filling the silence with chatter. Emma picked up a red crayon, hesitated, and slowly wrote 3 shaky letters, D-A-D. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, tears burning her eyes. That word had not been spoken or written by Emma since the night of the accident. Ethan crouched nearby, his voice low and steady as he read it aloud. "Dad." Emma's gaze lifted, meeting his, and then, as if the sound had unlocked something inside her, she whispered the word too. "Dad." The cafe seemed to freeze. For Clara, time folded grief, relief, all colliding in one unbearable moment. Her daughter had just spoken again, but not for her. For this man. And yet, instead of jealousy, Clara felt something unexpected, gratitude and the faintest flicker of trust. When her tear-filled eyes met Ethan's, he didn't smile triumphantly. He only nodded gently, silently giving the credit back to Emma. For the first time in years, Clara felt less like a CEO fighting a losing battle and more like a mother who might, just might, be getting her child back. And the man across the table, this single dad who lived in a world so far from hers, was somehow at the center of it all. The Anderson estate glimmered with lights as evening settled, its marble floors and sweeping staircases meant to impress anyone who entered. Yet to Ethan, standing awkwardly in the foyer with Lily clutching his hand, it felt more like a museum than a home. Clara had invited them for dinner, her voice polite but tinged with something he couldn't quite name, hope, perhaps, or fear. Emma hurried ahead, guiding Lily through the vast space with excitement that startled Clara. She hadn't seen her daughter so animated in years. As the girls disappeared toward the grand staircase, the sound of their giggles echoing through the halls, Clara's eyes softened. "She's different with you here," she admitted quietly. Ethan shrugged. Maybe she just needed someone to remind her she's safe. Dinner was served in a dining hall that seemed far too large for 4 people. The long polished table created a formality Clara had never questioned before, but tonight it felt wrong. Ethan noticed and moved his chair closer to the girls, breaking the stiffness with a story about a stubborn old truck he once fixed with duct tape and a prayer. Lily laughed so hard juice spilled from her cup, and Emma giggled, covering her mouth as if surprised by the sound. Clara watched, spellbound. The estate had been filled with silence for so long, and now here was laughter ringing against its cold walls. For the first time in years, it felt like home. But outside, the world had already begun to take notice. Headlines spread quickly. CEO's mute daughter speaks. Thanks to a single dad mechanic, Clara's board of directors convened an emergency meeting, questioning her judgment, muttering about vulnerability and weakness. "You cannot tie your image to someone like him," one executive sneered. "It undermines your authority." Clara sat at the head of the table, her knuckles tight around her pen. Their words pierced because they echoed her own hidden fears. Yet when she closed her eyes, she saw Emma writing "Dad" in crayon, heard her whispering words to Ethan that she'd never spoken to doctors or therapists. Slowly Clara stood. "If protecting my daughter makes me appear weak, then I'll wear weakness proudly. Because what you call weakness is the only thing that brought her voice back." The room fell silent. For the first time, Clara wasn't speaking as a CEO, she was speaking as a mother. Meanwhile, Ethan struggled with his own doubts. Sitting in his small apartment one evening, he stared at the guitar in the corner. He thought of Lily, of the life they had built in simplicity, and of Clara's world of cameras and expectations. Could he really belong there? Or would bringing Lily into that orbit only hurt her? The thought of leaving clawed at him, but it felt like the only way to protect his daughter. So when he stood outside Clara's home the next night, he tried to force the words out. "Clara, maybe it's better if Lily and I step back. Your life, your world, it's not for us." Emma deserves more than what I can give. His voice cracked, and though he tried to steady it, the truth was clear. He was terrified of not being enough. Before Clara could respond, a small voice cut through the evening air. "Don't go." Emma stood in the doorway, her eyes wide, her voice stronger than it had been in years. She ran forward, clutching Ethan's hand with trembling determination. "Don't go," she repeated, louder this time, as if willing the world to listen. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she dropped to her knees, pulling her daughter into her arms. Ethan stood frozen, undone by the weight of two words that carried the power of years of silence breaking at last. It was Emma's choice, her plea, and in that moment, all doubts fell away. From then on, Clara no longer hid the story. Together with Ethan, she launched a foundation for children facing trauma, blending her influence and resources with his quiet gift of patience and music. At the opening event, Ethan played his guitar, his rough hands coaxing tender notes that floated across the crowd. Emma sat beside him, humming softly, while Lily clapped along in delight. Clara watched them, not as a CEO guarding her image, but as a woman who had finally allowed herself to hope again. Their story traveled far beyond the city, but for the four of them, the true miracle was found in the ordinary. Shared breakfasts in a warm kitchen, crayons scattered across the floor, songs played at bedtime. The mansion no longer echoed with emptiness. It pulsed with laughter, love, and the fragile but unshakable voices of a family that had chosen each other. Clara realized she had not only regained her daughter's voice, but discovered her own, the voice of a mother, a partner, and a believer in second chances. And Ethan, once resigned to a life of sacrifice, had found that sometimes the smallest acts of love rebuild more than a family, they rebuild the soul. Sometimes the greatest miracles are born not in hospitals or boardrooms, but in the quiet courage of ordinary hearts. Clara discovered that her daughter's silence could not be broken by money or power, but by the patience and love of a single dad who refused to give up. Ethan gave Emma her first words back, and in return, Clara and Emma gave him something he thought he had lost forever: a family. Their story reminds us that healing begins when we choose to listen, to stay, and to believe in love stronger than fear. If this tale touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Tales. And tell us in the comments, what moment of kindness changed your life forever?